Hey guys, welcome. Week 12 of the Hard Knocks course. It's been going great so far. I hope you're getting everything out of it that you thought that you would and more. Very exciting, almost at the halfway point. This is where we start to get into the stage of the course where we're going to start doing behaviors that we're going to use on the day-to-day. So super important. We've spent a lot of time now, 3 months, really grasping the foundation principles and concepts, practicing those principles and concepts and kind of methods on our dogs with some kind of throwaway behaviors, right? The beauty about the way I train, and I want to make it clear to you guys, is what I am trying to do is not to say this is how you must do things, but to give you the knowledge and understanding so you can find out what works best for your dog. And this is why there's such a divide in the dog training world over systems and methods and principles and force free and positive only and blah, 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 blah. Balance training, compulsion training, right? Just take the best that works well with your dog. Right. So I'm giving you the understanding because what works well, and not only with your dog, but behavior by behavior. Right. So there's some things that I might teach my dog purely force free and positive only, like our free shaping stuff, for example. There's some stuff where I might use just straight compulsion. No, you must do this. There's no reward for doing this. If I look at stuff like crate training, there's very little reward. The reward is getting out of the crate after. So the compulsion kind of you must do this overweighs the reward or benefit to doing that, right? So that's why the dogs just go in there and they chew out. They don't mind it. They don't absolutely love it. Depends how you build it again, right? So and every dog is going to have a different response to different training styles. So this is the point I'm trying to make. I give you the tools, and I've been doing a webinar series of late, and they say there's many different ways to make pasta, right? What we must all do is we must get the boiling water first, right? How you make the pasta from that point, that's up to you, right? Everyone's going to have a little bit of a tweak to make it how they like it, to what fits into not even just their personal preferences, but legal parameters that we're in, depending on where we live and so forth. So it was a good analogy, right? But the end result is the pasta. How we get there in the journey is slightly different, but we must understand first how to use salt. We must understand how to cook pasta. We must understand what happens if we put pepper, right? So once we understand all these different components, how we go about it is totally up to us. So we are moving into learning pyramids, which is cool and exciting. And also the behaviors is we're going into the position box and we're going to learn our sit, drops, and stands. At long last, they say. Been doing a dog training course for 12 weeks and haven't even done any sits, drops, or stands. Well, it's all going to be very good from this point. And you guys are going to get awesome behaviors out of it. And you'll wonder why, or you won't wonder, you'll understand why up until this point I've asked you to try and refrain from using whatever it is that you want to be your formal cues or commands for your dog's positions, right? The difference between informal and formal. So formal is like, hey, if I give you this command, I need you to do it. So with my girl, my German Shepherd is Platz, sits, here, stay, right? They're her formal, which are going to be more her competition commands. So they have to be on point, and I don't ask for them unless I know that she's going to do it, and we're in a position where I can reinforce it. But she also has down, come, her name is an informal recall, sit, right? If she sits and she sits sloppy, yeah, cool. If I ask her to sit and she kind of blows it off, I'm not too phased. But that's not my formal, you must do this every time. So we're going to be moving forward, learning about the different learning pyramids. And today is positive reinforcement. Right, so you're going to learn about the different styles of training here, right? So you actually have an understanding of the different methods, different sides of the fence. And then what we do in the third week is I'm going to teach you about a system which is called NePoPo, and I'm not teaching you about that system, and I'm not a certified trainer. I have to make that clear because it's a trademarked system, and only people that are actually gone through the schools are allowed to teach it. But it's modern dog training nonetheless. So we won't even call it NePoPo from this point on. I'm just going to refer to it as modern dog training, right? So that's where we're going to blend all the systems together, and we're going to get amazing, the push and pull motivation that I spoke to you guys about, pushing the dog into behavior, pulling the dog out of behavior. There's motivation going in, there's motivation coming out. You're going to build awesome drive in your dog, and beautiful work between you and dog. So without further ado, because I can blabber on all day about this stuff, let me pull up this, and I'm not sure if I can screen share or it might just take over. All right. Let me see if I can swap it. No, it's just gone over. All right, I'll leave it like that anyway. Okay, so I'm behind the picture. So this is our learning pyramid, right? So this is the learning pyramid for positive reinforcement, right? Only positive reinforcement. So today we are talking about positive only training. Now, there's 3 levels to the pyramid, and if we start off at level 1, we are in the training phase. The teaching phase, right? The teaching or showing phase. This is where we are first starting a new behavior, right? All the pluses mean that reinforcement comes after every single rep, right? So what we're doing here is we're showing the dog that there is value to doing that behavior, right? There's no cue or command at this stage, right? So this is where we are kind of nutting out all the bugs and getting the behavior to a point in which we like it before we name it. All right. If we name behaviors too early, then the cue is just going to be bastardized, and it's going to be a sloppy end result because we've been naming that sloppiness from the start. If we use stuff like luring, luring mainly, but free shaping, right? All we're doing is rewarding for what we want, and we're keeping control of it. And we're going to create the picture, and then once we've got that picture that we want, then we can name it. So we move up to the second tier of the pyramid, which is what we would call the training phase, right? Or intermittent reinforcement, right? This is when we can start having a bit of reliability, or we start building in some reliability to the behavior so that it doesn't become reliant on the reward. Because level 1, because the reward is there all the time, the dog is doing it because it's getting the reward. We're luring, we're kind of controlling it, manipulating the dog, and cool, sweet, I got a treat for doing that movement. But we need to test the reliability so that we're not reliant on that luring all the time, or we're not reliant on the reward being there to elicit that behavior. And that's the power of the intermittent reinforcement. So what we do to intermittent reinforcement, this is when we actually start naming the behavior, right? We can name the behavior, and we would start to pay on odd numbers to start with, right? So we might pay 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the 2, 4, 6 they didn't get payments on. In the time that the dog didn't get payment, it is going to basically say, well, hey, what the hell is going on? I did the work, but I didn't get the payment. That's a bit weird. But it's going to give the dog a rise in dopamine. And what you need to do is you need to watch a video, which I'll put on the email, and it's called the Dopamine Jackpot. And it's going to talk about obviously how dopamine works in animals, right? Some of you, if you did my relationship goals workshop, you would have seen it in that. But this is where the unknowingness, where the probability of reward changes. So from going from 100% success rate to 50% success rate, the dopamine freaking spikes, right? When the dog starts doing the work, This is where the whole gambler addiction comes into it, right? Because it then removes the dopamine from doing the work to get the reward. It turns into doing the work for the possibility of reward, right? And the dog becomes that gambler. Am I going to get it? Am I not going to get it? So each time the dog gets given the command and gets reward one time, doesn't get it this time, I think when it moves to the 50%, I think it more than doubles the amount of dopamine that releases, right? Which means more commitment to the behavior, more desire to do the behavior, etc. Because the dog's turning into a gambler, like I said. So if we are looking at the second stage here, we've got the plus and the minus, which is very simple, right? You either, that's your only two options in this stage, is either to reinforce the behavior or not to reinforce the behavior, right? So when the only option is to either pay with food in positive training, or not to pay with food, which would be negative punishment, as we all know, it kind of limits how far you can take things, because it's very reliant on the dog wanting to actually do the behavior, right? And we're hoping that the dog does do the behavior, and it takes a long time to get a conditioned reflexive response out of the dog, right? It's not to say that it's not possible, and it's not to say that it doesn't work, but I think there was some studies done, and for positive reinforcement only, to build a behavior to a reflexive response would take about 6,000 repetitions, right? Now, if you were to build all the behaviors that you need to build into your dog using positive only training, 6,000 repetitions are a lot of repetitions, right? You would not be able to build all the behaviors you want, even just for a normal pet dog in its lifetime, to be able to get it to the level that you need to. Um, so that's why the concept of true positive only training is a falsehood, whatever the word is. The the people that even prescribe to the fact that they are positive only trainers are not, right. They don't have a true understanding of how the quadrants actually work, and how the environment plays a big impact on that, and it's up to the dog what it perceives as reinforcing and punishing and all that sort of stuff, right. So this is like, really, if you were to look at it in your free shaping is probably the closest thing you can get to positive only training, because you are really just relying on the dog to do whatever, and then we're just going to add treats to it. Whenever you bring stuff like luring into the picture, or any kind of leash communication, in my opinion, it now fails to be positive only training, because we are now manipulating the dog, and there will be, whether they like it or not, forms of negative reinforcement at play. Spatial pressure is negative reinforcement. Luring is a force, because we are actually, every action gets a reaction type situation, that if I'm moving my hand, then I'm forcing the dog to follow my hand with food. I'm manipulating that creature. Whereas the true concept of operant conditioning and positive reinforcement would be the dog displaying the behavior and getting the food. So therefore, it's only free shaping. So anyway, we move on. The way that these work is let me talk about the top tier. The top tier then comes to randomized schedule of reinforcement, right? So from being the intermittent, where we then start to do a couple where there's no payment and then payment, the dog sort of keeps the hope alive, right? And we need to do that. Then we jump up to randomized schedule of reinforcement. And this is where the distance between behaviors asked is the distance, the amount of behavior that's asked between rewards gets a lot greater. So in the pet dog world, generally, I wouldn't suggest that you need to go up to that stage. The top tier is mainly for either working dogs, where they're going to go out to find bad guys with the police, right? They might go out for a 5-6 hour shift, and they get the reward at the end when they finally find the bad guy. But they've done all those behaviors in hope and anticipation that reward is coming, right? The competition dogs that go out to trial, right? From in the training field where we're on intermittent schedule, we would then go out to a trial field and we would have to do a whole trial, which might go for 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour without reward. And all the behaviors done in that trial was done with the hope that reward was going to come, right? Each time we don't give the reward, the dog is like, you right? You liar. However, because it's gambler, it will continue to do the work if you set it up properly. And this is the powerful effect of dopamine. Because the command or the cue in itself is what then spikes the dopamine, right? So the way in which this whole system works is that you might be asking with the intermittent schedule, right? So then if I ask the dog to sit, does that mean that if the dog sits, I just don't pay the dog because it sat? Well, no. The way that we would move to an intermittent schedule of reinforcement is that we're going to ask for a secondary behavior, right? So we don't ask for a behavior and then just don't pay the dog. We stretch the amount of behaviors that we ask the dog to do before reward comes. So if we're working on sits, we might be working on sits. Well, we are going to be working on sits, drops, and stands individually. So let's say week 1 of sits, we're going to be sit, pay, sit, pay, sit, pay, sit, pay. Right, that's in the bottom level. Then we're going to move up. We're going to go sit, pay, sit, drop, pay. Right, so the dog's going to do the sit and be like, hey, he didn't get paid. Oh, but he's asked me for a drop. That's more work. That means my dopamine shoots back up, right, which recharges the battery as such before we give the payment at the end, right? So the dopamine effect is really important to understand because we are going to be using that to keep the dogs from getting to an extinction, right? Now, an extinction is where the dog loses all hope that reward is coming and the behavior becomes extinct. They get to a point where they're like, well, obviously it's not coming. That's it. I'm done, right? And this is why a positive only or a negative reinforcement only system can very likely lead to that extinction because you only have payment or non-payment. You've only got payment or non-payment. So it is a smaller amount of outcomes that the dog can gamble on. And if we go too long without payment, then the dog will start to pick up on that and the behaviors could go extinct. So actually what I might do is I might screen share and I might put the dopamine video on here so that we can actually watch it and I can explain some stuff after. So give me 2 seconds. Screen share. So I am the little one.
Hey, I'm Talon, and this is Rumpus, and I'm going to show you how to start an online t-shirt business. Let's go. First, go to
Aura TV. The world is thinking.
This monkey has been trained that when the little light comes on, it's one of those sessions where I can now get food, and it knows that if I press this lever 10 times, after a little bit of a delay, I'll get some food. If I press the lever 10 more times, I'll get some more food. It understands the task. So what do we have here? We have first a signal, the light coming on saying it's one of those sessions. We're starting one of those. Then the monkey does the work, and then with a delay, it gets the reward. And what everyone initially thought was dopamine would go up after the reward. That's not when it goes up. It goes up when the signal comes on. What's this? This is the monkey there sitting and saying, I know this. I know the drill. I know this. I'm on top of this. This is going to be great. I know what I do now. This is completely perfect. 100% I'm going for today. Dopamine is not about pleasure. It's about the anticipation of pleasure. It's about the pursuit of happiness rather than happiness itself. And what's most remarkable is experimentally, if you block that rise of dopamine from occurring, you don't get the work, you don't get the behavior. This is not only the anticipation, but this is what is capable of eliciting goal-directed behavior. Amazing elaboration on this, which now begins to tell us something real familiar. Okay, so in this study, elaboration, rather than this design, you press the lever the right number of times, you get reward. Do the work, you get a reward 100% of the time. That's how it works. Now instead shift to where you get the reward only 50% of the time. You do the work and only about half the time you get the reward. So what happens to dopamine levels there? This is what they do. They go through the roof. Because what have you just done? You've introduced the word maybe into the equation. And maybe is addictive like nothing else out there. Because the light comes on and you're doing the, I know how this works. This is going to be great, but I screwed up last time because I didn't get the food. But this time I'm feeling good today, but I'm a total screw up. And I'm inadequate in junior high school and it's terrible. And I'm thinking maybe this time this will just vacillating all over the place. What we see here is dopamine comes pouring out like mad. It's the uncertainty of the reward. And here's the really elegant thing they did in that study. Now, instead of a 50% reward rate, either 25% or 75%. These are diametrically opposite states. Worse news, better news. The only thing they have in common is you've decreased the level of unpredictability, and the rise in dopamine winds up being halfway between the 50% and the 100. And what's this about? This is the world of brilliant social engineering by humans, say, in Las Vegas, who understand how to design a place to take a curve where somebody has a gazillionth of 1% chance of getting a reward and making you think because it's this special day in this casino, and you especially are so much tilted to the right that you are going to get, and humans are profoundly manipulable in this realm. And it turns out, so are other species, the exact same neurochemistry. So what winds up being unique about us? And what you see is, with humans, it's the time dimension. You get the signal, you do the work, you get the reward. And the question becomes, how much time, lag time, can there be between the work and the reward to still elicit the behavior, to still get the work coming out? And we have just entered uniquely human terrain there for the very simple reason that probably most of us recognize, which is somewhere along the way, almost all of us worked very hard in school to get good SAT scores, to get into a good college, to get GREs, to get into a good grad school, to get a good job, to get in the nursing home of our choice there, sort of thing. And what we see is this astonishing ability of humans to keep those dopamine levels up for decades and decades, waiting for the reward. And in the most bizarre, unique realm of this in humans, sometimes we could maintain it with a belief system where the reward doesn't come in our lifetime. The reward comes after our death. The reward comes in our afterlife. The reward comes unto the next generations. And there's no monkey out there who's willing to lever press all the time because of what St. Peter's going to think somewhere down the line. So that is unique about us.
All right. So,
A good chunk of your time is actually spent writing
excuse
emails.
me.
If you don't know what Grammarly is, it's basically.
All right. So if we look at that, the little sequence that he set up goes back to our classical conditioning and also operant conditioning. But the signal comes, the work gets done, the reward comes after. The signal being our cue or command to do the work. So that's what, boom, spikes that dopamine. So when we start moving into that intermittent schedule, if we were not to pay the dog, then we would move down to an extinction. But when you understand how the dopamine works, we have to ask for another behavior because we just know that the signal spikes the dopamine. So the dog's going to get a dopamine spike from just being asked to do something else rather than get a reward. And then we could go, And he's like, well, hold on, I didn't get my payment. What's going on here? Okay, now we're going to ask for a sit. Boom. And it's going to jump back up. But we have to build this slowly but surely through the different levels of the pyramid so that we can really charge that battery, and then it might sink down a bit and then it spikes back up, and it sinks down a bit and spikes back up, because we always have to keep the hope alive that the reward is going to come. It's the next one. The next one's going to bring me the payment, the jackpot, the whatever, right? So all this not knowing, from not knowing how much the dog's going to get paid, to not knowing when the dog's going to get paid, to not knowing what behavior is going to be asked, not knowing how long he has to do that behavior for. These all play into this, right? And this is how you build super high motivation and super high reliability. So if there's any questions on that, guys, it will start to make a little bit more sense as we go through the coming weeks, right? It's just an intro to the positive reinforcement learning pyramid. Next week, we go through negative reinforcement training, and then we will talk about the combination of both the week after. So stay tuned, because upcoming is a video in the email of introduction to the box. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good one.